Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second day of 100 Days of React, where I'm going to be going through the core features of React in 100 days. So, in this second video, we're going to be talking about components, how to create components, and what components are in React. So, in React, components are just ways of breaking down your user interface into smaller chunks. That's how I understand it. And there are two ways of creating components. You can create components as functions and you can create components as classes. But in this video, we're just going to be talking about functional components. So now, how do you create a component, or how do components work? So, as you can see here, by default, React creates a function called app, and this is a component. So basically what a component is a function or a class that returns HTML elements. So as you can see, this is a normal JavaScript function that returns HTML, or in this case a div. And since this div is inside JavaScript, it's called JSX. So although this looks like normal HTML, but it's actually JavaScript code, but in the form of JSX. So by default, React creates a function called app, and this function is rendered in a DOM, as you can see here, as a component. So let's create our own component. I've already created a folder called components where we're going to be keeping our components, and by convention you should also do that in your project. And I've created a file called mycomponent.js. Just as a side note, this mycomponent.js can also be named mycomponent.jsx. In fact, I think you should stick to mycomponent.jsx, then you get this cool React icon. So what is the first thing we're supposed to do when we want to create a new component? The first thing we will do is import React. In this case, in this example, it does not really do anything, but by convention, it's good practice to import React from React. So after you do this, you then create your function. So there are two ways of creating a function in the context of React. Two ways that I understand, not two ways, but two ways as I understand them. The first way is by using the function keyword. Right, I'm going to name this my component, or no, I'm going to name it my component. So we'll create a normal React function, right, and under it we're going to export default my components. So what we did here is create a function, right? When we created a function, we now exported that function so that it can be imported in another file. So in the next video, I'm going to be talking about React imports and exports, so how to understand them. So we basically just have a normal function here. And as I said, a component is a function that returns HTML or JSX. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but a component is a function that returns HTML code. But in the context of React, this code here, although it looks like HTML, it's not actually HTML, it's JSX. So if you notice, this class name, if it was normal HTML, it's going to be class. But as you can see, class will not work. It should have an error or a warning. So you're supposed to use class name, which is React. That is the appropriate attribute for it, since it's not normal HTML. So back to my component, we have this, and we can return, let's just return something simple. We can return an H1, right? And we're going to put normal hello world. Okay, so since this is done, we cannot go to any other component, but in this case our app.js, since it's our app.js that is rendered in the DOM. But if you check our index.js, you can see our app.js is rendered. So instead of our app.js, you can now import my components from /my components. In the next video, we're going to talk about imports and exports in React. So this video just concentrates on what components or how components work. So right now we're just returning an h1 inside this component, and when the component is rendered in the app.js, so we can now write my component right here. And once we do this, we go to our browser and we can see hello world rendered in the DOM on the browser. So there are a few things you should understand about components. The first is that I cannot return two HTML elements inside a function. So the reason why this is like this is because in normal JavaScript you can't return two things inside a function. So therefore you cannot do it in React, since React is a JavaScript library. So this will work, you have an error. And what it says is that adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. So that just gives you the solution to the problem. All you have to do is create an enclosing tag, but in this case a div. So when you create that div, you can now copy and paste it here. Everything should work. Okay. I have a syntax error. So everything should work now. Okay. Sorry, let me just refactor my code properly. So everything should be working now. Sorry. Okay, now we can see that we have two hello worlds. So another thing is that I don't want to show you another way of creating a component or a function. Instead of writing it like this, I can write const, write my component is equals to an anonymous function, an anonymous arrowhead function. So the arrow function should be something you should be used to by now. So I just have an anonymous function that is saved inside this const my component. Then I'm not exporting the constant. It works the same way. So if I have a div, so if I return a div and the div says hello world or hello, just save time, you can see hello here. But this has plain text, not as an h1. So throughout this tutorial, I'm going to be keeping my constant like this because I understand. Sorry, I'm going to be keeping my functions like this because I understand it better this way. So I think that should be all about components. I'm still going to talk about another thing about component, which is props, but I think I'll keep that one for another video. So yeah, that's all for me for now. Bye.